G'day folks, welcome to another episode of Learn to Paint TV. Rod Moore here with you again, and I'm excited about this week's episode. This week we're going to paint a great little scene of some sheep in the midday sun contrasting against the shadows from the trees that they're standing around. And this is a good exercise in learning how to create that interplay between darks and lights, and then within the darks getting just enough detail to make it interesting. And within the lights, capturing that warmth of the sun as it sort of breaks through the trees. And we're going to do the sheep a little bit abstract. We're not going to look to paint perfect sheep, but enough detail there so that the viewer, as they look at the painting, they will recognise straight away that they are sheep. It's going to be a fun exercise. This is the photo that I took up in the Grampians. I stayed on a sheep station up there a few years ago, and it's a great little subject for us to paint. So let's get busy painting. Okay, welcome to this week's episode of Learn to Paint TV. Got a different type of project for you this week. A little bit different from what we would normally do. And what we're going to be doing is painting these sheep that are grazing in the midday sun. And the interplay between the sheep and the light, sunlit field and the heavy shadows of the trees here, I think is a really interesting composition. Okay, so step one of the Moore method of painting that we always teach here on Learn to Paint TV is to get our big shapes drawn in. So we're going to start with that. And for that, I've got my ultramarine blue and the alizarin crimson or permanent crimson or magenta. Just a cool, transparent red. I'm going to use those for my drawings. I'll take a little bit of water, and a lot of people think with acrylics that you should add water to it all the time. I only usually add water at the point of drawing, just so that we have a thin line rather than thick paint for our drawing line. So I'll add a little bit of water to it there, get a nice mauvey dark colour. And we have to think about our composition. There's no definite horizon line, but we want our sheep to sort of sit along that 1/3 mark through there. Okay, so if we use that, then the main sort of tree is going to be around about there. It's going to be shadow there. So this is all sort of bushes of the tree, and it's all going to be in dark in here. Okay, then we come down, and then we've got the shadow that sits under that tree is going to run in through around about there. Okay, and notice I'm being a little bit vague here as I map it out. There's a heavy shadow there. There's a little bit of light catching in through here, and then you've got back to sort of shadow there. Now in here we've got, on this side, that's letting more light through. There's a couple of tree trunks sitting through there with various bits and pieces. It's all just a bit of a haphazard array of branches and things in there. But it too also, if I bring that to there, it's also casting a heavy shadow under it there. And the foliage comes down in sort of through there, and that shadow is running in like so. So it's a little bit vague and ambiguous in there at the moment. It will become clearer as we start to progress the painting here. So I'll just mix up a little bit more paint for the purposes of getting our sheep in. Now, looking at the photo there is a lot of sheep in the photo there. You don't necessarily have to do them all. There's a couple of key ones. And what we want to do is just get the key ones in initially. So I'm just going to outline them. Careful of making them too big. So okay, at this stage I just want to get the rough shapes in there. I'm not trying to get every detail. Okay, so a few of them take on pretty much the same shape as they're grazing there, which makes it a little easier. And one good idea is, if you have trouble getting these shapes in correctly initially, you may or may not, but you might want to try a sketchbook and just try sketching them from the photo initially. Okay, there's one sort of facing side on. Notice how they've joined. I've joined those two shapes together a little bit there. That's important. You don't want them all just to stand out on their own, because they will clump together. And generally their heads are lost in the longer grass, so we can get away with not detailing up their heads and their legs and so on too much. Okay. Couple with their backsides to us. Okay. Now, as I said, you don't have to do every sheep that's there. If you get to a point where you feel like you've got a pleasing composition, then then don't add them all in. But notice I'm just doing these as rough shapes, and there's things that need to be tightened up in there. And we've got a couple in the background here. Now these are going to be smaller because they're further away. Okay, step number 2 now in the Moore method of painting is we're going to block in our colours and tones. And I've just added more ultramarine blue, alizarin crimson, yellow ochre, and some titanium white. And so what we're going to do is just get colour down here in the right places, in the right shade and tone. And then we'll let it dry, and then in step 3 we'll start to refine it all and bring it together. So what that means is I'm going to start off with our big heavy shadow tones in through here. I'm going to take a lot of the blue, and we'll take a fair bit of the red. We'll mix those two together, as you can see. Okay. Now the key here is to not just have one dead flat sort of dark. We want to push our darks to cooler and warmer side, so so that there's some interest, and so that the darks have a bit of vibration. So over in this side here, to the edges, we'll push it a little bit bluer. Okay, so we'll cool the shadow down. Okay, and then as we get over here to where we're going to have a bit of light, we'll add a little bit more red into the shadow, and we'll warm it up. Okay, and that'll just create a nice sort of vibration between the different shadows. Okay, so we just work that around. And so I sort of do that automatically. I'll just darken a little bit in places, and then I'll warm it up in places where it seems to make sense. Just always think, where's the light hitting? It's going to be cooler or warmer as a result. Okay. Now for the moment, I'm just going to block it all in. I'm not going to leave any passages where light might be poking through. I'll just get a bit of a rough edge underneath the bushes. But I'll add the lights back in step 3. Okay, so don't fuss too much. So I'm just going, in fact, going to join those two trees together, and then we'll introduce that bit of light poking through at the appropriate time. Okay, there, like that. Okay, and that looks like a good tone. A little hint of red in here and there. Okay, just to vary up the tone, and let us just now work in around those shadows. Just be careful that the shadow tone is still going to be a little on the wet side. So you can see what I've done there. I've made the colour get a little dirty, and this stage I don't really want to get dirty colours in there. I want it to be nice, clean colour. So I could have waited 5 minutes until the darks had dried if I wanted. Go and make a cup of tea. So you can see it's a nice strong light tone that we're putting in there, and it's going to contrast very nicely against that dark. So it makes this painting, I won't say it's an easy painting, still challenging for beginners, but it makes it an easy painting to sort of understand and follow when you just think about darks and lights like we're doing here now. You don't have to worry about mixing up too many different varieties of colour and so on. There's not a lot of different colours in this one. Okay. Now this is all quite wet up in here, so just be careful as you see that. I've just clipped into that wet dark. So this is a distant field past the shadow of this tree. It's in light also. And what I think I need to do is just, in one spot, just push that up. Just to shape up the tree, make it a little bit more interesting. Okay, I'll let that dry and then I'll touch that up. Okay, now right at the very end, well not at the very end, but in this little top section here, there's a little bit of sky poking through, not much. So we'll just mix up a blue and a white there. And I'll just touch that in. Just a little subtle hint there. Okay. So I am thinking that we pretty much have got everything in here that we need. I've just noticed one little spot. At the moment it looks all a bit, you know, to the untrained eye, it's all looking a bit of a mess, and you're probably wondering how's this all going to come together. And that's okay. Just watch and see. And what we're learning here is a process, a 3-step process that I've taught, you know, more than 20,000 students through our Learn to Paint Academy, and hundreds in our one-day workshop. It's a process where we build up our darks and our lights, and as we add some detail work into the tree here, and we get our sheep starting to take form and shape, you'll see this painting start to come alive. Okay, welcome back now. We're going to do step 3 of the Moore method of painting, which is our details, finishing touches, highlights, that type of thing. This has pretty much had a chance to dry, and it's settled down quite nicely. So I think we're ready to really get stuck into bringing this painting to life. So I've just put out some more paint here, and again we're using our ultramarine blue, the alizarin crimson or variant of that, yellow ochre, and our titanium white. So where I think we will start is I might just start to put a little bit of detail work into these trees here. Not too much, but just a little bit. Then we'll put in our sheep, start to bring them to life, and then we'll put in some more sort of foreground details. So we'll just progressively, step by step, bring this painting to life here. So I'm going to take a medium-sized flat brush, and there's a little bit of, you know, highlights and things happening in the tree here. So I'll mix up a green. I'll get our blue and our yellow. Okay, and that gives us a kind of a eucalyptish green. Just a pinhead of red, just to grey it back a bit. A little bit more on the yellow side. Okay, now if I wanted to get that as a punchier green, then I would add a cadmium to that. But I think, you know, more of a neutral green will suit us just starting out here. Now, what I don't want too much paint on this brush, so I just want to just rub some of that paint off. And I'm going to lay the brush flat against the canvas here, and I'm just going to scrub in where the light is just catching on the edges of this bush here. Okay, so I'm using the photo as a reference, and I'm just roughly following it. I'm not a slave to the photo. And notice I'm using a very delicate touch, and I'm not applying too much pressure, you know, over pressuring it. Okay, and a little bit there, here and there. Okay, so that just adds a little bit of form into the shadow area. So that's why we don't want that too light initially. We'll just start off with a neutral sort of a green there. Okay, and we'll start to bring it up, bring it to life a little bit there. Now in here I want a slightly darker version. So the way we'll get it darker is to add a bit more blue and a little bit of the red into that mix. And you can see that that there is darker than that one there. Okay, and again, same principle, we'll just pull some of the paint out. And I'm just going to just add in a little bit, just so we don't have just this massive dark. Okay, now this, you may not see this on the photo, but I just know that by adding in this little bit of dark here, and I'll go a little bit bluer now as we get further away from the center. Just by adding this in, we'll just add a bit of form into the shadow. I'll go to my little script liner brush here and add a little bit of water just to get a bit of movement in the paint. Okay, and then just using the tip here, we have a branch that's sort of running out like so, through there. And we have a secondary, a little bit too thin, too much water in that mix there, so I'll just add a little bit more pigment. Okay. And there's all sorts of little twigs and things happening in here. So we'll just make some little indications. That means our next logical thing to do is to start working on the sheep here. Now the sheep, we're going to put in our darks for our sheep. So we're going to need a blue and a red, but we need it to be slightly different than the darks we've used everywhere else. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to introduce the yellow ochre into that mix. Okay, because their overall tone of the sheep, they're sort of a dark white. They're not white. Sheep are never white. They're a dark, creamy, white-ish colour, and our brains just sort of like assume it's white. But in reality, that's not what they, what colour they are. So I'm just going to mix up those three. So that sort of pushes it a little bit on the greyer side to a little bit chocolatey. But I think it's going to be enough of a difference from the darks that we've already got there, because we want that little bit of a shift in tone. So what I'm doing now is I'm just blocking in the shapes. Okay, just blocking in shapes, and then we'll put some highlights on them and some mid-tone. Okay, their heads and so on. So now our next step really is to bring out the highlight area on these sheep. So the highlight area is going to be same as the grass area, really, only we'll make it just a little bit lighter. So I'll just take a big chunk of the white there, And I'll just pull it into a little bit of that yellow, okay, because that, rather than using just pure white for a highlight, by adding in that little bit of yellow ochre, it gives it a little sunlight effect, okay. And then to do this, I need to use the tip of the brush there, rather than the flat or the side. I need to just use the tip. So therefore I don't need any paint in the, built up in the brush like that. I'll just pull that paint out. And to load the brush, and this is really important how you load a brush. To load the brush, I'm just going to take the tip of it here and just roll the brush back and forward and just load the tip of the brush. Okay, can you see that, the tip there? And let's come to our sheep here. A little bit hard to see where they are in the shadow area there, but we know that they're roughly there. Okay. We know that the sunlight's catching on them there. Then we may have to reshape some of these bodies as we go, but that's perfectly fine as well. Okay, and you can see that starts to pull them out of the shadows. Okay, yeah, I think we need to just work on those body shapes just a little bit more. And what have we got here? That's just the back side of one there. Because I just felt that that purple dark was just not quite working as well as we would like. And really, we want this foreground shadow dark here to be a stepping stone for the eye to step over into that lighter area there. And that's about all I think we need to do with this one, really. I deliberately want to keep the sheep a little bit vague and sort of in the shadows, but they're shapes that you can actually work out what they are. And got enough detail in our trees and things to see that that's a tree with trunks and shadow. So I don't know that I want to do much more than what we've done with this one. I think we'll pretty much leave it there. So, if you compare, the photo itself doesn't have that many details in there. The only thing we might do is just punch up the yellow in there a little bit, but I think for the sake of keeping a bit of unity in the painting, I don't even know that we'll do that. Well, I hope you've enjoyed this week's episode of Learn to Paint TV. I know I certainly enjoyed painting it, and it came out a great little painting and definitely one to have a go at home. So what I'd like to invite you to do is to make sure you check out all the other episodes of Learn to Paint TV. I'll put the web address just underneath me there. So it's www.learntopaint.tv. You can see all the back episodes of the weekly TV show. And then the other thing I'd like to invite you to do, if you haven't done so already, is register for our free course at our online Learn to Paint Academy. So again, the web address is underneath me. It's www.learntopaint.academy. I look forward to seeing you next week on Learn to Paint TV. Cheers for now.